Hello, my name is Megan Dion. I am the Public Art and Artist Program Specialist with the Nebraska Arts Council, and welcome to the Fred Simon Gallery, which is located in the Nebraska Arts Council offices in the Old Market in Omaha, Nebraska. The Nebraska Arts Council is a state agency that offers programs, grants, and opportunities that foster creativity across the state. One of our programs is the Fred Simon Gallery, and we feature exhibitions by artists dealing with all different content and mediums from all over the state. Right now, we're going to hear from our current exhibiting artist about the work that they create for this gallery and in their studio practice and why they do that. So we look forward to seeing you at the Fred Simon Gallery and the Nebraska Arts Council very soon.
My name is David Gracie. I'm an artist. I'm also a professor at Nebraska Wesleyan University and the director of Elder Gallery. I want to talk a little bit about where my art has come from and how this work has developed. I'm originally from Baltimore. I grew up in a really interesting island of a neighborhood. The neighborhood was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. He's the same landscape architect that designed Central Park and Prospect Park. And the neighborhood was somewhat dilapidated. Originally was a summer neighborhood, but there was like a lot of personality. And so when I was one, my parents were divorced. Growing up, there was that initial, I think there was something that happened with that, the break and the divorce or something like that. And then just the nature of parenting at the time or something like that. I was like the epitome of a latchkey kid. I was left to my own devices. I spent a lot of time alone. And I think that time alone, I was trying to find something to kind of come to terms with something I couldn't articulate. And it would come out in ways where, I would draw all the time. I had this anxiety. And so I would get in situations where I would literally freeze in place. So I would try to walk across the street, and I would freeze in place as I was walking across the street. I'd see a car coming, and I would have to jump out of the way, which is so strange to think about. And I've been thinking about it more recently, that idea of freezing in place. And then there was other, times as I was growing up where I wanted things to kind of stay the way they were. So therefore I would just sort of check out or stop doing it, or I'd go on strike. So I think in 4th grade I stopped going, I refused to go to school. And then in the 6th grade I refused to go to school as well. And so both those times I took the time. It was like a sabbatical in 4th grade where I sat there and I just drew this huge drawing. Just because, I went to counselors and stuff, and my parents thought that there was something wrong with me. But it was, in many ways, it was me trying to, again, come to terms with the reality that I perceived through my eyes. And so at that time, it was very much about just holding on and trying to get through. I was a sophomore in high school, and I left to go to a concert in Boston. It was actually the Grateful Dead, and I told my mother that I was going to a friend's house. And we went to Boston overnight. I drove up, went to the concert, and then drove back the next morning. I got dropped off at a friend's house, and the friend, I walked in, and my friend's mom was there, and she was crying, and she told me that my friend had died, and he was found in a car, and he overdosed. And so I was just shocked and walked out. And after that moment, that was sort of the moment where I knew that there was something I couldn't articulate. There was something that was I had to deal with, but there was also something that was going on that was I thought was important beyond me. And so that's where I felt like I was kind of closest, where I started to become or wanted to be an artist. When my dad went to the Maryland Institute College of Art, so I was encouraged from a young age to do art, and my dad didn't worry about getting a job because he was a banker and he went to art school. So he just sort of found his way that way. And he just thought that art school made you, allowed you to think in a way that, it was a way of reflecting and critical thinking that can serve you well in many different ways. And so, from that moment when I was a sophomore in high school up through my graduation from my MFA program at Northwestern in 2004, kind of dealing with the idea of devotion and my relationship with my circle of friends and portraiture and the impossibility of representation, and my work became this thing that was very much about the past, and it was very hyper real at a certain point, and it got kind of colder and weirder by the time 2004 came around. This painting right here, that it's the third in a series. It's the third with the same title, and it's also the third in a series of ice cube paintings that I've made. Once this thing starts to get going, where I start to look into like doing this type of painting, I just like the paintings started to feed into themselves, and the ideas of that I was like, that kind of was the initial inspiration, was like the fire underneath it that kept on sort of pushing me forward, like I would not give up. This painting here represents kind of like typical of that sort of realism, except it sort of diverges a bit. But I started to like kind of eliminate the thing I was looking at and just like making up, or just like trying to like just sort of wing it, by like putting down marks and seeing what happens and then putting something next to it. And it just started to become a different type of process for me, where it was, I didn't know what was gonna happen. A lot of that was sort of chasing one big, maybe something will happen. Like eventually it will be interesting looking. Usually I was like choosing subject matter too that was like very mundane, and it's like, I think that sort of David Lynchian thing of the melancholy, like it's something that comes off as like less important. You bring importance to it. As a contemporary artist making work, a lot of times the way that our work is shown is digitally, and they're distributed a lot of times via Instagram, things like that, that are lower quality, and sometimes it's hard to understand what you're looking at. The thing about the size and the frame is that I wanted people to understand that these are physical things in the world, and that they were paintings and they have a surface, and there's a sense that you're not getting all of it. Like you have to move around it like you move around a sculpture. And if you just look at it frontally, you might be missing something. And I want people to see these in person, and I want them to understand that if you see them on Instagram, you're not actually fully seeing them. The way these best work, I think, is like having people experience them on multiple occasions, like revisiting them. I want people to live with my art, and I want my friends to live with my art. So I make work mostly that is, smaller, stuff that can kind of fit in people's houses. I have like a test wall in my kitchen, behind my television, in the sense that I want them to be able to stand out in relationship to their surroundings, but also not be completely obnoxious. I want them to be paintings, but I want the frames to be that sort of supporting cast, or that thing that a frame used to be, I guess. But I had a really hard time trying to find frames that worked that way. So over the years, I've started making frames. So these are frames that I've made, and I started painting the frames to work with the paintings, so they can't be really sort of pulled apart. At this point, I want the frames to be part of the paintings. You can pick them up, and on the back, there's on some of these, there's actually other paintings, and there's I paint the back so you can. I like the idea of actually holding a painting and looking at a painting like in your hands, kind of like holding a steering wheel. There's a sort of intimacy to that I think is nice. And that idea of like living with something involves a certain intimacy, and you're seeing it in so many different ways. It's with you when you're so many different ways, when you're having a good day or a bad day, or like things change around you, you change, but it's still kind of there and present. There's this sort of danger to like invest meaning into a physical object like this, and I understand that. And I was actually sort of educated within that notion of like being fearful of but at the same time, I think a certain balance is okay. And I think right now this balance is maybe needed, at least in my work, against this sort of somewhat disposability of just scrolling on Instagram. In the show Never Ender, the work is broken up into series, and so there's a repeated motif. The way they're displayed, they're intermingled amongst one another. In some cases, they're hung together. This is an example of one, and this is an example of another. So this is actually comes out of a group of paintings I did of nests. And for me, when I started to make the nest pieces, just for example, again, there starts to become this internal logic that is personal, but then I try to reconcile it with like, why am I doing it that's less not totally self-centered, something that's just sort of not so obtuse, and something that that can kind of hold my interest, and hopefully that can hold other people's interests. I have a deep fear of just illustrating ideas, partially because of like some of the teachers I had, where it seems like they don't feel like they are the thing. They are sort of adjacent to it, and sort of. So I don't want to. It's always difficult to totally explain things away, but the idea of making the original nest pieces, which developed into what this thing looks kind of like a tornado nest thing, is that I wanted to make a painting where the act of making, like each mark, added up to what I was trying to represent in my mind's eye. So in this case, like twigs or pieces of hay or whatever, something like that, I could put down each mark, and that would be literally that thing, and I could weave them together in such a way that, so I was feeling like I was actually weaving, not representing weaving, and that weaving of my marks then wove together the nest. So I was weaving, so I was making a nest. And the idea of the nest can be kind of it's a loaded thing. And I spent a lot of years trying to like pulling meaning out of things or trying to like tamp down meaning that couldn't be tamped down. So I'm just letting this loose, knowing that this is kind of like a loose cannon, the idea of a nest, especially like an empty nest or these different things. But for me, the action that happens is in the, and with a lot of these has to do with like the slight angle differences, the slight relationship differences in the way the framing is, like how they sit within the frame. So this one, how it sort of distorts up forward and pulls back a little bit and torques, and it feels like wobbly. Like I want this to be like its own thing beyond the idea of connecting the process and the medium in that way. So with the sun has a circle in the center, and I like the idea of having that sort of terminating point for your vision. I think that's like the ultimate composition, that sort of radial composition. I think it's the most unsparing, direct. My own personal subjective feeling is I'm drawn to these sort of centered type of pieces. It gives me solace and peace when I make it as the first viewer, and also it's sort of it's what I want to, I feel like I can show others. So art has to have some sort of tension, something that's happening within it that, you know, that keeps it going. That's the never ender. That's the thing that the show is about. It's that, that unresolved, not in a bad way. It's like, it's just, that's the natural way it is. There's some things that aren't answered, and it's not about answering them. They just are. And so, like trying to kind of find that place with the work is what I'm always going for. So this piece is the most recent piece in the show, and it's the one that makes me most nervous. It's the one that I don't understand. It's the one that it gets me the most excited about, actually, maybe in not the best way, just because of I don't have enough distance from it yet. But again, that's the whole idea. When you know, to tell you what this is drawing that developed as in relationship to a class. Actually, a lot of stuff, like a lot of my work has to do with my personal relationships, my life. It's trying to like break down some barriers between, or whatever barriers that become obstacles in my art and also become obstacles in me being a better person. I started this with a student, telling the student that they should just let go and let it rip and see what happens, and allow the work to come to them. So let the work tell you what it needs and allow it to develop. What this ends up being is like vignettes into different ideas that are seemingly unrelated. It's kind of like our cable TV that we don't watch anymore, or the internet, or whatever else. All these things we try to find connections with, but they just don't have any connections. And that's there's lots of channels going on in this thing, in the big head. And it's this big, when I was making it, I thought of it as like a ship. And it had this sort of like dead, sad eye thing going on that was like made very early in the drawing that just like kept it. I was talking about trying to you always needed some sort of drama or some sort of conflict happening in the work. And I think for me, it's the chaos of the ideas and the imagery and whatever else, and trying to hold it all together formally with like the ideas of painting and drawing and color and all that stuff. I look forward to hopefully getting a chance to have you see my work here in the gallery, and also I'm originally from Baltimore. I've been living in Nebraska for 21 years. So I'm a full-on Nebraskan, so I hope that I get to to have you see my work, and I hope to get to meet you. And thank you for listening to me.